Welcome back to In Business. Rio Tinto will hold an investigation into its operations after a Chinese court sentenced 4 employees to as long as 14 years in prison for taking bribes and infringing on commercial secrets. Our next guest comes from a firm that has the highest concentration of lawyers in Asia of any international law firm. He's here to tell us about what it's like to do business in China right now. Is this a game changer? My guest is Bob Profusek, Global M&A and Corporate Chair at Jones Day. Thank you so much for coming in today. We heard this case, the charges of fraud. No one's going to come to the defense and say if someone did admit to taking bribes that's something that should have happened. But the question is that other part of the accusation, right? Commercial secrets. What do we know about this case?
Well, we don't really know a whole lot. Obviously, it's got an enormous amount of publicity, and companies around the world have been watching. And not that they think that their people necessarily doing anything wrong, but just how the system works.
Right.
And from a sort of Anglo or a Western perspective, it's a little bit inscrutable. Parts of the trial were not public, which, of course, in the Western systems is unusual. And so we really don't know what the story is on in terms of this. The secrecy aspect of it and the alleged stealing of state secrets. We do know, and Rio Tinto has already discharged the employees, that something happened. We don't know precisely what it was, so therefore it's kind of hard to assess whether this is an overreaction or this is a message or what. So there's a lot of confusion right now.
Well, and there's almost it's hard to decide what the lesson is from this, right? Because we don't know exactly what the accusations include in terms of what are deemed to be commercial secrets, right?
Yeah, that's one of the problems with it. We don't know. Now, there is one thing that's been admitted, which was the taking bribes in a circumstance where the state fixes prices and to circumvent that. So a stiff penalty for that sort of thing, not surprising in China or really any other country in the world if it had comparable restrictions.
Right, to be fair, it's a good point. But tell me, I mean, your firm does a lot of business in China. You do business there. What are the guidelines for engaging in transactions there?
Well, every client I can think of has a China strategy, or is at least working on their China strategy. You can't not have a China strategy, but it's a rapidly evolving process. It's one of the things I tell clients all the time is that business is global, but the law is national. It's not global. You really have to take it into account. And many of the rules that exist in China are not written down. They're in the process of development. There are approvals that have to be obtained for pretty much any significant investment. Well, so that means you've got all the issues you have when you negotiate a deal or a joint venture or whatever in any other country, and then it's got to go through a regulatory approval process. The leaders in China, really since November, have been making a point that China is, after all, still a socialist country. And the
government's vetting transactions
that's right.
more.
It vets transactions. Almost any transaction has to be approved. And the rules so far are not well written, are not written down really at all. Last year there was a new antitrust regime that went in place, but unlike the case in the U.S., the rules right now are still in flux.
I mean, the counter to this is to say, and I'm sure Chinese officials say this, look, you want to acquire something in the United States, you got to go through CFIUS. There is a process. We have rejected Chinese acquisitions in this country because they were deemed to violate security interests here. So why can't they? Why should they disclose?
I don't think there's any reason they shouldn't. And in fact, anyone who objects to this as a matter of concept, I think, is missing the point. Sure, we have CFIUS, we have Hart-Scott-Rodino, we have all sorts of things. The one difference, though, is, and this is going to change. I mean, let's be fair. This is a rapidly evolving situation. Laws are new. They're working on it as fast as they can, I believe. But in the United States, you can call up a lawyer and say, okay, how do the rules work? Give me the exact numbers, and they'll give you the answer. Here, it's a much more fluid process, and there's more discretion in terms of the regulators on anything. I mean, you look at maybe the best example out last year was Coke deal, the juice deal. That was a $2.8 billion deal that obviously Coke thought before they announced it was going to get through, and the government turned it down. Did they turn it down on the standards we're accustomed to? I don't know, but probably not.
And they may not give you that level of detail as to why.
Right, that's right. But, and one of the things that's really important about doing business in China, not an advertisement for lawyers, but there's a perception that it's the same as it is in the rest of the world. Well, it is and it isn't. Business is the same, but the legal systems are quite different.
So lawyer up if you're going to do business there.
Not bad
and then
idea.
hopefully the lawyers can figure out what the laws are, basically,
That's right.
is what you're saying. Thank you so much, Bob Profusek of Jones Day, for giving us your perspective, because it is an important conversation as we look to growth continuing to be led out of Asia.